Let's talk about artificial intelligence a little bit, if we could. 70 years ago, Alan Turing formulated the Turing test. To me, natural language is one of the most interesting spaces of problems that are tackled by artificial intelligence. It's the canonical problem of what it means to be intelligent. He formulated it as the Turing test. Let me ask sort of the broad question. How hard do you think is it to pass the Turing test in the space of language?
Just from a very practical standpoint, I think where we are now and for at least years out is one where the artificial intelligence, machine learning, the deep learning models can bubble up interestingness very, very quickly, and pair that with human discretion around severity, around depth, around nuance and meaning. I think for me, the chasm to cross for general intelligence is to be able to explain why and the meaning behind something.
Behind a decision?
Mm-hmm.
So being able
behind
to
a decision
tell
or a
stories.
set of data, sets of data.
So the explainability part is kind of essential to be able to explain using natural language why the decisions were made, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of our biggest risks in artificial intelligence going forward is we are building a lot of black boxes that can't necessarily explain why they made a decision or what criteria they used to make the decision. And we're trusting them more and more, from lending decisions to content recommendation to driving to health. A lot of us have watches that tell us when to stand. How is it deciding that? I mean, that one's pretty simple, but you can imagine how complex they get. And
being able to explain the reasoning behind some of those recommendations seems to be an essential part. Although it's
which is a very hard problem because sometimes even we can't explain why we make decisions.
That's what I think we're being sometimes a little bit unfair to artificial intelligence systems because we're not very good at some of these things.
Yep.
Do you think, apologize for the ridiculous romanticized question, but on that line of thought, do you think we'll ever be able to build a system like in the movie Her that you could fall in love with? So have that kind of deep connection with. So,
hasn't that already happened? Hasn't someone in Japan fallen in love with his AI?
There's always going to be somebody that does that kind of thing. I mean, at a much larger scale of actually building relationships, of being deeper connections. It doesn't have to be love, but it's just deeper connections with artificial intelligence systems. So you mentioned explainability.
That's less a function of the artificial intelligence and more a function of the individual and how they find meaning and where they find meaning.
Do you think we humans can find meaning in technology in this kind of way?
Yeah, 100%. And I don't necessarily think it's a negative, but it's constantly going to evolve. So I don't know, but meaning is something that's entirely subjective, and I don't think it's going to be a function of finding the magic algorithm that enables everyone to love it. But maybe, I don't know.
But that question really gets at the difference between human and machine. So you had a little bit of an exchange with Elon Musk. Basically, I mean, it's a trivial version of that, but I think there's a more fundamental question of, is it possible to tell the difference between a bot and a human? And do you think if we look into the future, 10, 20 years out, do you think it would be possible, or is it even necessary to tell the difference in the digital space between a human and a robot? Can we have fulfilling relationships with each, or do we need to tell the difference between them?
I think it's certainly useful in certain problem domains to be able to tell the difference. I think in others it might not be as useful. I think
it's possible for us today to tell that difference? It's the reverse, the meta of the Turing test.
Well, what's interesting is I think the technology to create is moving much faster than the technology to detect.
You think so? So if you look at like adversarial machine learning, there's a lot of systems that try to fool machine learning systems. And at least for me, the hope is that the technology to defend will always be right there, at least. Your sense is that
I don't know if they'll be right there. I mean, it's a race, right? So the detection technologies have to be 2 or 10 steps ahead of the creation technologies. This is a problem that I think the financial industry will face more and more, because a lot of our risk models, for instance, are built around identity. Payments ultimately comes down to identity. And you can imagine a world where all this conversation around deep fakes goes towards a direction of driver's license or passports or state identities. And people construct identities in order to get through a system such as ours to start accepting credit cards or into the Cash App. And those technologies seem to be moving very, very quickly. Our ability to detect them, I think, is probably lagging at this point, but certainly with more focus, we can get ahead of it. But this is going to touch everything. So I think it's like security. We're never going to be able to build a perfect detection system. We're only going to be able to, what we should be focused on is the speed of evolving it and being able to take signals that show correctness or errors as quickly as possible and move and to be able to build that into our newer models or the self-learning models.
Do you have other worries, like some people like Elon and others have worries of existential threats of artificial intelligence, of artificial general intelligence? Or if you think more narrowly about threats and concerns about more narrow artificial intelligence, like what are your thoughts in this domain? Do you have concerns, or are you more optimistic?
I think Yuval, in his book 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, his last chapter is around meditation. And you look at the title of the chapter and you're like, oh, it's kind of, it's all meditation. Yeah. But what was interesting about that chapter is he believes that, kids being born today, growing up today, Google has a stronger sense of their preferences than they do, which you can easily imagine. I can easily imagine today that Google probably knows my preferences more than my mother does. Maybe not me per se, but for someone growing up only knowing the internet, only knowing what Google is capable of, or Facebook or Twitter or Square or any of these things, the self-awareness is being offloaded to other systems, and particularly these algorithms. And his concern is that we lose that self-awareness because the self-awareness is now outside of us, and it's doing such a better job at helping us direct our decisions around, should I stand? Should I walk today? What doctor should I choose? Who should I date? All these things we're now seeing play out very quickly. So he sees meditation as a tool to build that self-awareness and to bring the focus back on, why do I make these decisions? Why do I react in this way? Why did I have this thought? Where did that come from?
That's a way to regain control.
Mm-hmm. Or awareness, maybe not control, but awareness, so that you can be aware that, yes, I am offloading this decision to this algorithm that I don't fully understand and can't tell me why it's doing the things it's doing because it's so complex.
That's not to say that the algorithm can't be a good thing. And to me, recommender systems, the best of what they can do is to help guide you on a journey of learning new ideas, of learning, period.
It can be a great thing, but do you know you're doing that? Are you aware that you're inviting it to do that to you? I think that's the risk he identifies, right? That's perfectly okay. But are you aware that you have that invitation and it's being acted upon? And so
that's a concern. You're kind of highlighting that without a lack of awareness, you can just be like floating at sea. So awareness is key in the future of these artificial intelligence systems.
Yeah, the movie WALL-E, which I think is one of Pixar's best movies besides Ratatouille. Ratatouille was incredible.
You had me until Ratatouille. Okay.
Ratatouille was incredible.
All right, we've come to the first point where we disagree. Okay.
It's the entrepreneurial story. in the form of a rat.
I just remember just the soundtrack was really good. So
Excellent.